Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here and good afternoon. My name is Lauren Williams. I'm Adult and Community Services Manager here at the Columbia Public Library, which is a part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library System. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, where we're going to hear from Gina H. With the Missouri Budget Project about the very hot topic of taxes in Missouri. Today's Lunch and Learn is co-hosted by the library and the League of Women Voters of Columbia and Boone County. That's a little bit of housekeeping. We have people attending both in the room here, the Friends room of the library, and also on Zoom. So if you're on Zoom and want to ask a question, please use the chat feature. And we ask that you use the drop-down menu in chat and select that your chat can be seen by everyone so that people know what questions have been asked. And when it's time for those in the Friends room here to ask questions, I'll be walking around with this microphone so that people can hear you online as well. So we ask you to hold your questions for that time. And then we are also recording this presentation, so it will be available in the next few days on both the library's YouTube channel and the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County's YouTube channel. And now I'd like to welcome Diane Schuler of the League of Women Voters to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Lauren. And welcome, everyone. I'm always encouraged and heartwarmed to see so many people at Lunch and Learns on taxes. It's often a hard sell on the committee whenever I propose something that has to do with finance. So it's nice to see everybody who turned out, to those of you who are on Zoom. We're very happy to welcome Gina H today. Is that H? Thank you. From the Missouri Budget Project. The Missouri Budget Project, as you probably all well know, is an independent bipartisan group that looks at and analyzes finance and budget issues for the state of Missouri. A little bit about Gina. She joined the Missouri Budget Project in 2019 after finishing her master's degree in social work. She's been with the organization for about 6 years, seven years now. She specializes in leadership and social change. Certainly a lot of social change going on right now. We may have to have you back for another session. Gina is from rural Missouri, so she certainly knows all about the wrinkles and warts of Missouri, and will be able to speak to a lot of the issues that I'm sure are on her minds. We welcome you and look forward to what you share with us and to some questions. Thank you.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you for inviting me today. If you're not familiar with Missouri Budget Project, we are a nonprofit organization, as she had mentioned. We analyze the state budget, tax policy, as well as other economic issues. We also advocate, though, for public policies and programs, particularly those that provide opportunities for Missourians with low and moderate incomes, opportunities for them to thrive. So, that said, the topic of today's discussion is what you need to know about taxes in Missouri. So, the first thing I think people should know is that Missouri has an upside down tax system. It is regressive, and what we mean by that is people with lower incomes pay a higher share of their income in taxes compared to folks with higher incomes. Currently in Missouri, when you combine both state and local taxes, folks earning around, say, an average $20,000 a year are paying close to 10% of their income in taxes, compared to, say, a millionaire who's only paying about 6% of his or her income in state and local taxes. So, unfortunately, lawmakers are debating some tax changes that will likely make life a little less affordable for folks with lower and middle incomes, if those things pass. But first, before I talk about that, I think it would be helpful to provide some background on how we got to this point here in Missouri. So if you take a look here, this is Missouri's fiscal year 2026 operating budget. Missouri has three big main buckets of funding. You've got federal funds, nearly half of that comes from the federal government. That's what you see in red. You also have state earmarked funds. On this slide, it says other state funds at the bottom in the light blue. Those are earmarked funds, so that's going to be something like gas tax. A portion of that has to go to transportation. Some of lottery revenue goes toward education, etc. And then we have on the right there, general revenue in the dark blue, state general revenue, about a third of our budget. At Missouri Budget Project, we talk a lot about state general revenue. This is because these are the funds that lawmakers have discretion over how they spend those funds. A lot more, I should say, as compared to federal funds and earmarked funds. Majority of general revenue, as you can see here, is comes from individual income tax, followed by sales tax, and we will talk a little bit more about that later. So how are those funds allocated? This is showing you by department, and you can see that social services gets a lot of funds allocated to it. However, the thing to note here is a lot of those funds come from the federal government. That's the red that you see here. The dark blue is general revenue, light blue is the earmarked funds. Departments, programs that rely heavily on general revenue funds, they are the ones that are most susceptible or at greater risk of seeing budget cuts whenever there's a budget shortfall or economic downturn. So here we go. So for the past several years, Missouri has been spending more than the amount of revenue it has brought in, to the tune of about $2 billion a year. That's that little red pie piece you see there. Missouri, by Constitution, has to have a balanced budget. So to complete their budget, we've been using a savings to plug holes in our general revenue budget. And again, that's what you see here on the far right. That is estimated for the fiscal year 2027. Fiscal year 2027 budget is what lawmakers right now are debating. Where did the savings come from? So as many of you know, during the COVID pandemic, the federal government gave states lots of money to help them weather that storm and get through that. This provided a lot of investment opportunities for Missouri, especially for those programs that were already underfunded in Missouri. But those federal funds were temporary. Like I said, it was just to help us get through COVID. But it allowed the state to set aside general revenue funds it otherwise would have had to spend if not for those federal dollars. So during our height of our savings in fiscal year 2023, we had over $5 billion in savings, the general revenue set aside. Since that time, we've been spending that down, like I said, to fill gaps in our budget. while all this was going on, if you take a look here, this is showing you tax changes since 2014. The bulk of which has resulted in over close to $4 billion in revenue loss for our general revenue budget. Just to put that in context, 3.8 billion is $1 billion more than Missouri spends in general revenue on the school foundation formula. So this is how much we are losing annually. These tax changes are being phased in, so they're still being implemented. So we expect that to continue to go higher, a larger loss to our general revenue. Even the 3.8 billion. I know that when we started tracking this several years ago, at least since I've been here and we've been tracking this, given this presentation, that number has gone up every year, sadly, in Missouri. By the way, feel free to ask any questions as I go along.
I just had a question.
Yeah, sorry.
Because I'm kind of blown away.
Yeah.
So the very first one, oh, sorry. The very first one is top rate of income tax cut from 6% to 4.5% and exempt first 1,000. We're talking about the very richest people? What's going on there?
So the top income bracket, it was at 6%. It is scheduled to go down to 4.5%. It's being phased in. So the bill was set up so that the state collects so much general revenue, then it would trigger a fraction of a percentage cut in the Missouri's highest tax bracket tax rate.
Highest income.
Which, like I said, I think it was 6% when this started. I don't know how many brackets we have now, because as it goes down, we get fewer brackets. And so yeah, so that would be, so for everyone whose income is over a certain point, that percentage of their income is taxed at 6%.
And then we got the other one is the corporate rate tax cut and the capital gains exemption. These are the main reasons why we're losing all this money. And am I right to say that these are all big gains for the rich in Missouri?
A large amount of that is, the wealthiest Missourians, businesses, had got some, benefit out of that as well. But yeah, I mean, you pointed out the income tax, that is 2.7 billion. So of this 3.8 billion, 2.7 billion of that comes from that phasing down of the income tax in Missouri. And unfortunately, because of all those, well, one, because it's happened slowly, people haven't even noticed it. And also, like I said, because of the COVID funds that kind of helped mask what was going on behind the scenes, because we were able to spend our savings. And so people didn't realize until now, which we'll talk a little bit about later, this year, I'm sure many of you've heard, there's a lot of proposals, unfortunately, to cut funding for a lot of very essential programs because our savings has now run out.
So according to Google, effective the first of this year, we went to one flat tax bracket of 4.7, down from 8 brackets the year before.
Okay. Yeah, exactly. So as they've been lowering that top tax rate, it's been eliminating brackets as it's going once it gets down to a certain point. So
On your previous slide, in terms of savings, in 2025, there was a jump back up to 4.3. Are we investing those funds or do we see an infusion of additional funds so that if we had bought down in 2024 to 3.6 billion, but now in 2025, we've got 4.38 billion to pull from?
Yeah, I don't know for sure where, that surge came from. I was about to say something, but I don't know for sure, so I will not comment on that. Specifically why we got a little bit of extra bump there.
Don't they also have a large amount of money from taxes on marijuana sales that were earmarked for 3 different specific places that they haven't done anything with, that are just sitting there?
I don't know that it's just sitting there, because some of that, as you mentioned, does have to go to, I don't remember which state,
Well, they
places
were,
they have. But also, I do want to say, people have really overestimated the amount of revenue that's coming in from that general revenue. We do have a fact sheet on that. So I encourage you to take a look at that, or you can email me and I can point you to, where that information is. But we get that a lot, the marijuana. Everybody talks about, don't we have a lot of marijuana? It's surprisingly a small amount of money that the state is actually bringing in from the marijuana tax. Yeah.
well, I guess the question would be, what is a small amount of money?
I will have to, like I said, I don't want to misspeak, so I will have to take a look at that. And then also about if it's sitting there, I don't know.
I think it was just in the millions, what I heard.
Yeah, considering the budget cuts that they're facing right now, I'd be, curious to see.
Oh, I just Googled the marijuana revenue. We received, the sales were 1.5 billion, it says in 2025. And the revenue for Missouri was 255 million.
Yeah, and that budget shortfall that I mentioned that we've been experiencing, it's about $2 billion a year. So. Sorry. And so this is just showing our general revenue collections have flattened out from fiscal year 2022 all the way over to fiscal year 2026. Again, not surprisingly, we've had quite a bit of tax cuts. So in addition to all of that, while all that was going on, something that Missouri is facing is the One Big Beautiful Bill, or HR1, which I frequently refer to it as, that Congress passed last summer. It implements historic spending cuts to several programs, particularly SNAP and Medicaid is what we focus a lot on, because the majority of those cuts occur to those programs. So Missouri is estimated to lose about $20 billion in federal funding for Medicaid over the next 10 years because of HR1. The state will also have to pay more of the administrative cost for SNAP. Right now, the federal government pays about half of the cost to administrate supplemental nutrition assistance program, which provides food assistance for folks formerly known as food stamps. So right now, the federal government pays about half of administrative costs. That's going to go down to 25%. So the state's going to have to come up about 75%. Additionally, The state is going to, for the first time, have to pay for a portion of the benefits of SNAP that goes to folks who receive SNAP assistance. So we're talking rough estimate, an additional 180 to $250 million the state's going to have to come up with for SNAP. So for both SNAP and Medicaid, in order to maintain funding at the current levels, the state is going to have to find a source of revenue for those programs. Addition to that, it's HR 1 increases financial penalties for state administrators for any types of program payment errors in those programs. So that's something else the state may have to come up with, unexpectedly have to come up with some additional revenue to pay for that. These programs, and one of the reasons that we want to make people aware of these programs, they're so vital to many people in Missouri of all ages, from seniors to children, working adults, and it's just giving you an example of that. Rural communities also, in many of our rural areas where the employment opportunities may not be as vast, not surprisingly, many of our rural folks are more likely to rely on these programs compared to those in metro areas. On the left there, you see Medicaid, 26.3% of folks in our rural areas rely on Medicaid compared to only about 18% in our metro areas. On the right is SNAP by household. The darker colors, the darker the colored, the more households, the higher percentage of households that participate in SNAP. So in some areas, we're talking over 30% of their households in those counties rely on SNAP.
We have an online question. Someone asked, why would a senior depend on Medicaid? Wouldn't they be covered by Medicare?
So for Medicaid care, even for seniors, there are certain out-of-pocket expenses. There's also premiums for folks. So if older folks cannot afford those additional costs, if they have a low enough income, they can then qualify for Medicaid. Nursing homes, yeah. Yeah. A large amount of Medicaid covers a large amount of folks in long-term facilities, covers funding for that. Yeah, something a lot of people don't realize, but yeah. So back to HR 1, because of the changes that are being implemented in HR 1, we're estimating, not we, but experts estimate about 170,000 Missourians will lose their Medicaid coverage, and about 58,000 Missourians live in households that are at risk of losing SNAP. SNAP food assistance. And this is because, mostly because of the barriers and red tape. So, HR 1, it expands the work reporting requirements in SNAP to a larger population of people. And it also, for the first time, implements Medicaid work reporting requirements for able-bodied adults. However, we know from experience, particularly from states who have tried implementing work reporting requirements and Medicaid specifically, that unfortunately what ends up happening more times than not is it puts up more barriers for folks to get those services and programs, like when they're applying or recertifying. And so you end up in a situation where even eligible folks end up losing access to those services. And so that's where, much of these losses will likely come from. In addition, HR 1 requires states to do more verification, and so the state's going to have to come up with funding for that as well, to come up with the verification technology, whatever they decide to do to comply with the new requirements. And this is at a time where Missouri's departments are already understaffed and overloaded. So this is going to be a challenge. Again, it's going to be difficult for folks to get through. So bottom line, you're getting less help coming from the federal government. The state is having challenges paying for pretty much anything. We have, like I said, we have a shortfall with our budget. So that means a lot of these folks the responsibility is gonna fall on our local communities to figure out how to raise the revenue to help care for these folks who are in need and provide assistance. Unfortunately, though, I'm gonna talk about it a little bit. Right now, Missouri lawmakers are proposing something that is going to make it harder for our local governments to do that. So HR 1, it's being phased in over time. SNAP work reporting requirement expansion that already started. Starting this October, we will begin the cost share for SNAP administrative costs. And then over the next couple years, you'll see those other changes being phased in. So again, this is in addition to all that was already happening in Missouri with the budget that I previously talked to you about. Yeah. Okay. Missouri already, even before all of this, was already investing in its citizens less than a lot of other states. We're near the bottom in our funding that we spend per person in Missouri, as well as the amount of revenue we collect per person. And even when you compare just to our neighboring states, our spending and amount of revenue we collect is already close to the bottom. So, for example, our share of state funding for K through 12 education is lower than every other state in the country. Our eligibility for child care subsidy is lower than all but 3 states. Yes.
Yeah, yes, the funding for healthcare and the funding for education for the teachers is way at the bottom out of the entire United States.
Will you repeat that for them?
Yes, he was saying our funding for education, healthcare already at the bottom. Are you in the education field?
I'm sorry?
Are you in the education field?
No, I'm
Okay.
not, but a teacher lives across the street from me. And he's having a tough time. They raise the wages just a little bit, but not nearly enough. We're at something like number 48, 47 or 48.
Yeah.
That's real close to the bottom. We now no longer have a clinic or hospital in Macon, Missouri. They closed. There was a hospital and a clinic kind of off and on in Fulton, Missouri. That's not there anymore.
And I appreciate you mentioning it because that reminds me, part of HR 1, this was an issue that came up when Congress was debating that that loss of funding going for Medicaid. and how much that's gonna impact rural communities in particular. And so one of the compromise they came up with is this rural transformation fund. But those are where they're gonna, certain rural communities can get some additional funds, but it's temporary. It's temporary, it's not over the long term. It was just to help get that bill passed. So some folks use that as a selling point, folks being Congress people who are in favor of these major cuts. But over the long haul, it's gonna be a net loss for rural communities.
That's gonna particularly affect people in the lower half of the state.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and what you're seeing here on, so even not just compare, even when we don't just compare it to other states, but even within our state programs, within our state, funding is less than for some of our programs than what they were years ago. And so this is just showing on the right, our child care investment in child care subsidies. Fiscal year 2015 in blue compared to fiscal year 2023 in red. So we're talking about half as much we are investing now than we once did. And then when you adjust for inflation, which is on the far right, that's even, it gets even worse. So our funding for older adult area agencies on aging for older adults, that has been flat for ages now in Missouri. So the point here is that we have no room to cut, basically. There's no change in the cushion, yes.
So my understanding that it is, in addition to federal HR 1, that Missouri also has an HR 1. I don't know if it's that they're considering it or that it was passed in that special session, which I'm reading that it was part of the agenda for the special session, where I don't know if it means that what we're going to see is on top of what you're showing us, or if there's an additional.
I know there has been something proposed, I don't believe it has passed, where they want to make it even, so HR 1 makes things harder, but there's also, they allow flexibility for states to make it even more strict. And I believe there's something that was introduced regarding Medicaid, where the state would like to do that. I think though that might be something that has to go on the ballot. It would have to go on the ballot.
Okay.
Because we passed Medicaid expansion by the ballot and it went into the Constitution. So it would have to go on the ballot if they want, because it's in the Constitution, if they want to do that. So I have heard where they are trying to make it even more strict, eligibility for Medicaid expansion. Which brings me to another thing. They're really, Congress and some of our state lawmakers speak of these work reporting requirement restrictions are aimed at able-bodied adults. It's important people to keep in mind though that even folks who are eligible end up losing benefits. And we've already seen so far with SNAP since those work reporting expansion has started, we have seen that other groups, not just able-bodied working adults, lose participation, or looking at the participation numbers, that we've seen those numbers start to go down as well for children and people with disabilities. So it'll be interesting over the long run if that continues. hopefully it does not. But anyway, moving on. So governor's proposal this year for fiscal year 2026, this is just showing you areas where he's cutting K through 12 funding. Last year, they were bragging about meeting their thresholds. Well, this year, they've Department of Education will not be getting that additional funding request needed to meet the foundation formula that they requested. School transportation cut, health, senior services, mental health, and it goes on and on. That's from the governors. I think he was cutting about 600 million. The House then, they proposed, I think it was around 2 billion. It's now in the Senate. We'll see what they all end up doing, but the bottom line, a lot of services, yeah, are going to experience some funding cuts in this year's budget. Oh, and if you, on top of that, if you hadn't heard, there's now a wait list for childcare assistance. On top of all of that. Sorry, folks, but it gets worse. How am I doing time? Okay, I'm doing good. So on top of all of this, the governor, and many state lawmakers want to eliminate the state individual income tax. They've been threatening to do this for years. And so this year they got the governor who says, let's go for it. So this is showing you general revenue on the left. Individual income tax is 64% of our general revenue. That's in fiscal year 2026. So that eliminating the income tax would mean significant reductions in funding for programs that receive general revenue. So just for context, 64%, you could eliminate all state GR funding for education, childcare, mental health, and senior services, and still not have enough to make up for that loss of the individual income tax. That's a huge amount of money. So some have proposed using the sales tax, so replacing the individual income tax with the sales tax to fill that gap. However, there are places in the state that the sales tax is already over 10%. This is because the state does restrict what local governments can do, how they can raise funds. Only St. Louis and Kansas Cities can have an earnings tax. And the state also limits what localities can do in terms of property tax.
I just have a short question, and that is, has anybody figured out exactly why they want to eliminate income tax? I don't think I've ever had anyone explain that to me.
Right, it's not an I mean, isn't it based on economics, Diane, where if we put money back in people's pockets because they don't have to pay income tax, that we're just gonna stimulate the economy and we're gonna go out and buy things, but now we're gonna be taxed more on those things we buy?
It's kind of the supply side economics raising its ugly head again.
Yeah.
And in this case, the thought is, well, if you eliminate the income tax in Missouri, it's going to cause a flood of, and corporate tax too. You're gonna get a lot of businesses coming in. That's gonna make.
Capital gains and corporate were the same argument. Yes. Put
Exactly.
more money back in the hands of the wealthy and they'll stimulate the economy.
Right, yeah, but those are flawed arguments because it doesn't work.
Since 1980.
Yeah,
it feels like
it even worked
1980 again.
in Kansas, you know, all you have to do is look to Kansas. It didn't take them long to learn their lesson.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you keep in mind, as I showed you, Missouri has been cutting taxes for several years now, and for over a decade. And here we are with a budget shortfall.
Duh.
Yeah. And yet they still want to move forward. They still want to move forward. Also, as I mentioned at the very beginning, Missouri has an upside down tax system. The majority of the taxes in terms of share of income, majority of the taxes that people with the lowest amount of money are paying, that share is property tax and sales tax. And that's what you see in the blue. The dark blue is sales tax. The light blue is property tax. So people who are already paying 10% of their income in sales tax, the majority of that share is in property and sales tax. But if you look at the highest income earners, their highest share comes from the income tax. So at the end of the day, this is yet another tax break for the wealthiest people if we were to swap the income tax with a sales tax. And we actually did some comparisons because a lot of the proponents of this, what we call a tax scheme, like to bring up Florida, Texas, Missouri wants, in Tennessee also. We need to be able to compete with these other states. So here you see Missouri in blue, the other states in gray. The group on the far left are folks in the lower 20%. The group on the far right are top 1%. So when you compare us to these other states, Tennessee, Florida, and Texas, again, we're talking share of income paid in taxes. Missouri, first of all of them are regressive. You probably noticed that. But that aside, for people with the lowest incomes, Missouri's faring better. Missourians are faring better, even with folks in the middle. And then on the higher, folks with a higher income, we at least require our folks to pay a little bit more compared to other states. But even besides comparing in terms of share of income paid in taxes, when we compare us to many of these states that they talk about, even on terms of economics, Missouri's doing pretty good. Missouri's keeping up just fine. There are even businesses that oppose the tax scheme that they're talking about. So that should give you an idea of how unpleasant this thing can be. So lawmakers have we all knew, like I said, they've been talking about it for a while. So Missouri Budget Project, we've known about it for a while, but now this year is the year they've actually put something forward. It is still very vague. It's not detailed, but what we do know is they're proposing to eliminate the income tax. And it's going to go on the ballot. They want voters to give them permission to expand the sales tax to more services. So instead of increasing our current sales tax rate, they want to apply a sales tax to more things. And they're asking our permission to do that. They're not saying specifically what things they want to tax. They have admitted they're gonna wait for us to pass, give them permission, and then they'll iron that all out later. It is HGR 173 is what they have proposed, but it's important to know that lower taxes. As I said before, they've been doing that. A lot of people didn't even know that they were doing that. They do need voter approval to raise taxes. That's why this is going to the ballot. They don't want you to know that. They're saying, they're framing it as we're giving voters the choice. Yes, they are, but The only reason they're going to the ballot is they need our permission in order to raise sales taxes.
Yeah, I just wanted to know how, am I on?
Yeah.
Okay. I just want to know, how's that Hancock amendment fit into this?
That's why they have to go to the ballot. Yeah. Yeah, because Missouri, they can lower taxes, but they need voter, if they want to raise them a lot, they have to get our approval.
So they're lowering income taxes, but raising sales taxes. So
Mhm.
they can do they can lower your income taxes without approval.
They've been doing that.
Yes, and so, but now they have to accommodate for the fact that they're getting themselves further and further in the hole. And then they're going to apply more sales tax.
Yeah, because for years they didn't talk about sales. They were just gonna eliminate income tax, but I think the reality has hit that they can't, it's gonna really put us in a really bad shape if they don't replace that income. So then at least they got to the point of recognizing that they're gonna have to do something to replace that. Yeah.
Do we know about the timing of this coming on the ballot? Someone was asking online. Is it for sure that the question about eliminating the income tax and raising sales tax, is that going to be on the 2026 ballot? Or are we still waiting for this to be voted
The
on?
income tax won't be on the ballot at all.
Well, it does say, it starts with, so it's kind of a ballot candy thing. Yeah. Starts with, should Missouri eliminate the income tax? And then it goes on and have permission to do whatever sales tax. Yeah.
But we will see that on the ballot this year.
I believe they're trying to do it this year. It's in the Senate, at least as of yesterday morning, it had not passed the Senate. It already passed the House. It's in the Senate. So we're waiting to see what the Senate ends up doing. So they may make some changes as well.
In here.
Yeah.
The one factor, that income tax brings 64%.
Of general revenue.
Is astonishing. I mean, if nothing else, to tell people that amount would be lost. It would have to be replaced. I mean, it wouldn't take much thought to put that piece together. You don't even need all the detail. That one factor is pretty compelling. I'm just.
Well, it gets a little bit worse.
You're afraid.
Be very afraid.
So, no, that's on. Yeah, okay. This is just showing all the additional things that could now be taxed if they expand the sales tax. Again, they have not said specifically which things they want to tax. But like childcare, internet, I mean, it goes on and on that people already, that are not, being taxed on, they're gonna be surprised that all that can get add up, how much that can add up. So the other part of this is, it says that, so some, localities have sales tax in addition to, the state sales tax. Like I said, it's one of the things that our state does allow, localities are a way that they can raise revenue is a sales tax. So that the local sales tax are tied to the state sales tax in terms of what things can be taxed. So this could mean additional revenue if we expand to more items being taxed. This could lead to additional revenue for local governments. Unfortunately, in here is a provision that says any revenue that additional revenue local governments get from these additional items being taxed, they then have to offset that by lowering sales or property tax. So if you are a local community that's got, you're looking for funds for, I don't know, affordable housing, or perhaps all those people who may be losing their health care, or, I mean, you could think of a number of things, schools, teachers. I mean, we've got a lot of school districts down to 4 day weeks. You you know, ordinarily you might think, oh, finally, we get a chance, but no. This bill says, no, you cannot, you have to offset that. So it pretty much.
It's
Yes, yeah. Yeah.
Does our state government tell each locality, and I don't know if that's a municipality or what it is, that there is a cap? And it's a specific cap that each is given as to the percent of income tax that they can keep in their, I thought I heard our mayor say once that there's a ceiling and it's like 2%. And then the rest of it goes to the state, and that's, you know, part of their pie graph.
I'm not familiar with that.
So it sounds as though they're gonna keep that percent the same, even if you're having to off balance.
Yeah, I mean, the point is, like, if, say you got it in, your population grows, right? This is not gonna allow you to have the revenue to help, you know, provide the services, public service or whatever, to help, a growing population. You may have your community is growing older, right? And so you have more people who need older adult service. And assistances, some tax cut that's a huge part of our state general revenue that we have lost to that income tax that's been phased in. Well, it kind of sets you cements you into where your budget was at the time that you first started that. If you can't go beyond revenue beyond that particular percent, I mean, there's inflation, there's everything that goes on, but you're still stuck at where you were when, because it restricts you because of those percentages.
I was thinking that the restriction is on the percent, so you could grow your population and have more sales tax, your absolute dollars would change, the percentage would change. So maybe you get a little bit, is that, am I thinking right? Okay.
per
Yeah.
person. And I think there is, if I understand it correctly, there is some wiggle room. Municipalities can increase their sales tax rate, or a little bit, you know, so they could.
Yeah, there's
increase-
less restrictions on sales taxes. That's the one thing where they don't have too much restrictions on.
Right, and property tax the same. There's kind of a cap that you
Yeah.
can wiggle up to that cap.
Yeah, property tax was part of the Hancock Amendment. There are definitely limits
Mhm.
on what they can.
Just a kind of a one, this, I realize this sounds weird, but silver bullet to all of this. If you go back to that graphic that you had where the sales tax might hit some of those various types of payments people make. If you look at a lot of those, you know, vet services, internet, sports clubs, you know, these are high end, these are kind of the more wealthy people who are doing this. If there could be a selective way to choose which things would be taxed, you know, that could actually be good. You're actually assessing a tax on the people who are paying for things that are much kind of luxury sort of things, right? Where for most of us, we can't, we're not doing that.
Car repairs.
If we were, that leads me to, thank you. If we were to go ahead with this tax scheme, it would still not be enough to replace the income tax. We would be $5 billion short of replacing the income tax if we exempt housing and healthcare, which is what the governor wants to do. It would still be $5 billion short. Now, that's not in the bill. There's no exemptions in the bill, right? But even if we had no exemptions, we would still fall a bit short of what we would need to replace the income tax. So yeah, we still haven't even talked about they haven't even talked about exemptions and how that's gonna happen. Because if there are any exemptions, we won't be able to, it won't be enough. We won't be able to generate enough revenue to fully replace the income tax. So we would still be looking at some funding.
Do you have an estimate what the sales tax would have to be? You know, it's already in Columbia places 9%.
Yeah, so if we did not, I actually do, and this is because this was before we knew that they were gonna try to expand the sales tax rather than raise. So we were working on the assumptions that they would increase the sales tax
On everything that was now being.
on everything that's currently being taxed. So right now, the state sales tax is 4.25%. To fully replace the income tax for fiscal year 2026 budget, that tax would go up to 12.725%, so close to 13%.
Wow.
For some localities who also have a sales tax, you could be looking at something around 18% total state and local on sales tax, which is on the far right there.
Yeah, and because we have those areas here in town. But certain part of town is charged a certain sales tax, and
Yeah.
if you go into another place, it's considerably higher.
Yeah.
And by the time you go in there and buy something for $5, you're wondering why you're still digging in your pockets to try and, pay that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I want to make one more comment about the local sales tax. Even if there's wiggle room, like you're talking about, when we're looking at rates like this, it's gonna be so unpopular to have any increases in local sales tax at all.
And right now, like I said, that's pretty much the only, option that's often available to folks at the local level, because, certainly people are not happy with property taxes right now, right? Like I said, they can't do income taxes, so yeah, that's even gonna make sales taxes less appealing, sales tax increases. You're telling me my time, oh, yeah, my time is just about up. No matter how they do it, whether they, increase the sales tax on current items, it's still gonna be, a lovely tax decrease for folks with the highest incomes. For everybody else, where either it's not gonna be changed or that's gonna be increased, especially for people with lower incomes, it's going to increase their taxes. Now, this is if we leave the tax the same and just increase it, but if we expand it, what the lawmakers are proposing to do, 60–80% of Missourians would see a net increase in their taxes. And so folks earning around $65,000 will face about $535 net increase in taxes. The only folks who will see a decrease in taxes are the 20% of Missourians with the highest incomes. And another thing I want to mention, for folks to keep in mind, is that older adults, people on active duty military, people who many don't have to pay income taxes. Well, guess what? They're gonna see a net increase in taxes, because their sales taxes would go up.
Yeah, so they end up getting us
Yeah.
in the long run.
Yeah.
They, so many of these benefits that they give us just don't pan out once you see what's ahead of you.
Yeah.
Precious.
So that is all. I thank you so much for having